What's up guys, it's Jarrett with Left Lane Customs again, and today we're going to be working on ball joints on a Volkswagen bus or a transporter or hippie bus, whatever you want to call it. This is a job that I have never personally done before. I've always been under the impression that it requires specialty tools and whatnot to do, but I have spoken with some people who've had some success on their own, and so we're going to give it a shot today. It requires a hole saw and then also a press. I just have a Harbor Freight 20-ton, just a regular bottle jack press. Those two things, mainly the press, are the biggest part of this. So it's still kind of an involved process. It's not the easiest job in the world. You are going to need a couple specialty tools, but it saves. The last time that I went to have it done, it cost me $500, so it'd save you a little bit of money to do it on your own. You don't have to go as deep on the beam as I've gone to disassemble it, but I chose to do this because I'm going to cut and turn the beam to give the bus a little lift, and I ended up having a broken leaf here in the torsion pack, and so I'm just going through the whole beam and going to redo that whole thing. But if you choose to, you can just remove the spindles, and then you'll have your arms attached to the beam still. And the lower one is really simple to pull. You can pull both the lower, or I guess this is the lower. Pull these guys out real easily. The upper ones are quite a bit trickier to pull, so it's up to you guys. I would assume you'd be able to keep them in the beam and then make some sort of table or a jig of some sort that would keep it level with the press, and be able to keep those in and press them out. But for this case, I am going all the way, so it'll make it a lot easier to show you the process. So let me get the camera set up and I will show you what the next step is. Okay, so I have the entire arm, control arm, fixed in the vise here. The first step is we're gonna cut this spindle off of the ball joint itself, and that's just gonna allow us to then put our hole saw down over the top of the ball joint. And so I'm gonna use a death wheel or a cutoff wheel on an angle grinder here, and you guys can choose whatever means you want to do it, but I'm real familiar with these guys. I use them every day, and they can be a safe way of doing it. So that's what I'm going to do. You guys could use a torch or whatever you got, but for this video, that's what I'm going to use. So let me go ahead and knock this off of here. So we got that knocked off, and now we are able to fit our hole saw over the top here. So the hole saw that we're going to need is, we need the ID, the inside diameter of the hole saw, to be just wider than this inside lip here on the ball joint. So I'll take my calipers here, and if you can see that, we are right at 1.99, so it's 2 inches. So we need a hole saw with the ID of, or the inside diameter of 2 inches. That'll just clear this lip, and then we'll be able to put that right over the top, and we're gonna just cut this outer flange away. All right, so I actually had to run down to the hardware store because I didn't have the right size hole saw. So this is a 2 1/8 inch hole saw. I took my calipers to the hardware store with me so I could make sure that the ID was the right size, and it is like a 32nd smaller, which is perfect. I was able to knock the edges down real quick, and so now you can see this thing just fits perfectly over the top of this upper lip. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cut this lower flange off down here, and what that's going to do is, at this point, you can see this flange protrudes out far enough to where we can't touch the actual control arm if we were to try to press this out, where we need something to press against the control arm. So we're going to cut this off of here, and that way we'll be able to take a piece of tubing and then be able to press from the down below, and have it supported here as we press that through. So we got the hole saw on here, and we got the lubricant. Just have a little bit of cutting oil that's in my little, what do you call this thing? I used to call them an oil can, but anyway, we're gonna put this guy and just put a little bit of oil around this just to keep that bit, or keep the hole saw from doling and keep things cutting a little smoother here. One thing that I want to mention is that we don't want to cut into the arm. So take your bites small and take it off and look at it and just kind of see where the high spots and the low spots are. Work it evenly around, and ideally we don't want to cut all the way through. We'll end up taking a chisel and actually breaking these off. So that's the biggest thing, is just don't cut into the arm. And there she goes. So that's the first step. And now, I'll pull you off the tripod here. So there is the ball joint with the flange cut off. I just set this guy on there to see, but this is that flange that we are cutting off of there. And so when it's on, obviously you couldn't put a piece of tubing over to be able to press against the backside of the arm here, because you'd be still pressing on the ball joint. So that's why we're cutting that guy off. And just to give you a little different view, this is a new ball joint. So this end is pressed down through like this, and you can see that that lip a lot better. It's pretty thick and comes all the way to the outside of the arm. So we're gonna do that to all 4 of them, and then we'll move over to the press and see how much force it takes to get these out of there. Okay, so we are set up on the press, and I have a piece of 2-inch ID aluminum tubing. Ideally I'd be using steel, but this is all I have, so let's hope that it works. So essentially all that it's gonna do is go right over the top, and you can see here inside the ball joint will slide down through here. So it's just creating space for the piston to press through and allow this to drop through the arm. So we're gonna set this on here like that, get everything squared up, and start pumping away and see what happens. Boom! And there she came out. There, it just popped all the way through. So back this off. And now there is our control arm with no ball joint. Pretty fancy. So the next step is, you can see that ball joint has lived inside of this arm for a long time, and there's quite a bit of corrosion and a little bit of surface rust and whatnot going on inside of there. So I don't know if you would call this, I guess you would call this a race. But whatever it is, we're gonna clean this all up and get that shined up, so that way when we put the new ball joint in, this guy here, it will slide in real nice and not have any restriction from any of this stuff. So the first step that I'm gonna do here is I put a real light grit sanding drum on my Dremel here, and it's about 100 grit sandpaper. The biggest thing is you really don't want to take any material away from inside of here. So there is enough scale in here that I do want to knock some of that down, and this is going to be the quickest way of doing this. If you're not real familiar with using one of these, then I would recommend something a little less abrasive. But if you are pretty well versed in rotary tools and Dremels and die grinders and whatnot, then this will be a good option. So that is all that I'm gonna do with the Dremel. You can see it took that top layer off, and it's a lot shinier already. So here I have my maroon Scotch-Brite, little pad here, as well as some real fine steel wool. So I'm just gonna go through by hand and really just work this and get this thing as smoothed out as possible. Just try to knock off all the rough edges. You can go as nuts as you want to go with it. I'm not going to go crazy, but just really trying to get this as smoothed out as you can get it, and that already feels a whole lot better. It's kind of like cleaning the cylinder, piston cylinder. You know, you don't want to go nuts with it, but you want to try to knock off any of that deposit that might be on the walls in there. And then just a little bit of steel wool. And I can run my fingernail through there now, and I'm not catching anything. I don't feel anything that's gonna really restrict that ball joint from going back in there. So that's good. I think we're ready to put the new ball joint in. So I'm gonna move back over to the press, and I'll show you pressing it back in there. The key factor when it comes to these ball joints is you see that there are these two kind of bossed ears, I guess you'd call them, on the arm itself. And you'll notice on the ball joint that there are two cutouts, one right here and one right there, opposite of each other. And when you press this in, you want to really make sure that they match up, so that your cutout is matching your ear on this side and vice versa over there. So that's kind of the only critical thing that you need to pay attention to when you're pressing the ball joints back in. But so yeah, that's it. I'm gonna throw the camera back on the tripod, and we'll get this set up and press it in. So here is the ball joint all put back together in the arm. I apologize, that last clip, I had my buddy in here working on another bus on the other side of the shop, and he was grinding, so I couldn't really narrate it at all. But essentially, I took that same piece, the same aluminum 2-inch ID pipe that I had, and tube, and the arm sits on top of that, and as you can see, the inside diameter just clears the outside diameter of the ball joint here. So that sits there, which allows the ball joint to come all the way through and rest into place in its seat that it wants to sit in. So that goes like that, and then I have this piece of pipe here that is just barely big enough to go over the boot of the ball joint, and it sits right on that flange. So I have this is my setup on the press with a piece of flat bar on top of this, just to create a nice surface area for the piston of the press to press down on. So that's how I put it all back together, and it's the same process for all four of them. The upper control arms have these little, I don't know what you would call these. They're little inner races or spacers or whatever, but they essentially fit in the top part of the spindle here. When I got these ball joints today, I got them brand new from my part supplier, and they do not come with this piece here. They look just like this, and so this piece is actually pressed on as well. So I couldn't film that part because my battery died on the camera, so I just got the battery charged back up. But essentially, I have the old piece that I cut off here. This is attached on this, and I just set this guy on the press, and with this piece on it, it fit just like this into that socket, like that, and then you press down and it pops, and this guy comes off, and then it's just the reverse process to put that back on. And it doesn't take, this one doesn't take a whole lot of pressure. It just has a nice little pinch, and this shoulder right here comes flush with the top of the spacer here. So other than that, that's pretty much it. It's a whole lot cheaper than taking your beam to a shop and paying their time and labor to do it, but it does, like I said in the beginning of the video, require some specialty tools. But again, if you got it down to this point, and if you didn't have the tools to do it, it's still going to be a whole lot cheaper to bring the arms in, and even if you wanted to go through and take the hole saw and cut those so the shop didn't have to do that. Most shop rates are up above $90 an hour these days, so every little bit of time that you can save the guys who are doing it is going to save you money. So whether you do it yourself or you have somebody do it, at least now you know the process, and you'll know a little bit more about your bus. So with that, I'm going to keep making some videos on some different projects that I have going on. I'm working on my personal bus here. Her name's Roxy. I'm going to actually end up doing a cut and turn on the beam, and so that'll be another video that we're going to cut the beam apart, turn the inner clip on the inside 1/4 inch, and which will translate to about 1.5 inches of lift. So that's in the process. We're going to do the rear torsion bars as well and turn them 1, maybe 2 splines. So I'll do a video on that. We got a lot of stuff going on this client bus here. I'll make some videos about some body work on it, and then we also have this guy, which is another personal project. This one's going to be a flipper. So we got it all torn down. I got a bunch of body work that I'm doing on this guy. And so anyway, stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next video.